Welcome to another episode of Called Bank Sports. Last week, we talked about ranking the West. We thought that was a lot of fun. We're still kind of in that dead area of not a ton of news unless you want more Ben Simmons videos. So we're going to go and talk about the East. But first, before we do that, I kind of hinted at that we wanted to run a fantasy league. We're not sure, we're not sure what prize we're going to offer the winner or anything like that. But we did want to ask you a question. First, if we have a fantasy league, are you interested in joining it? And second, we're debating between running the fantasy league on ESPN and running it on an app called Sleeper, which Nate and I think it's a cool app. We both like. So let us know. We're excited for it. We think it'll be a lot of fun, and yeah, it's exciting to plan for the season, have that draft as to get going. But with that being said, let's hop into the East. We don't talk about the East much on this channel because we focus on the Jazz. So I don't know, do you have any initial thoughts before we try to rank these teams? I think this might even be harder to do than the West.
Yeah, no, I think it's going to be harder. I mean, I think that if you had more knowledge, you might be able to pick these a bit better. But basically, I mean, we're looking at end of season seeding, right? So before we get to it, I'm basically of the mindset that no matter where they're at, even if they're the 8th seed, a healthy Brooklyn Nets is going to win the title. So, I mean, obviously last year, and I totally get that Milwaukee played their guts out in that series, but I don't think anyone can really say that if James Harden or Kyrie Irving is healthy to play along with Kevin Durant, that they don't make it to the Eastern Conference Finals last year. So we're going to get to the play-in, but basically this is me just dreading the Nets. No matter where we seed them, this is me dreading the Nets.
Okay, and before we get into who we think will be in the play-in, Nate and I talked before we started recording, and we're saying Detroit, they have no chance. I think their strategy this season is to tank again and hopefully get another talented piece to pair with Cade Cunningham. Orlando is out, and Cleveland is out. They don't even have trade assets to make win now moves right now. So unless everyone in the East gets injured, they don't have a shot.
I mean, I feel like everyone in the East would have to opt out, not even get injured. But that's a pretty harsh take. So yeah, then we're looking at as kind of the fringe teams. I think we decided on the Toronto Raptors, the Chicago Bulls, the Washington Wizards, Indiana Pacers, and Charlotte Hornets. So, I mean, Toronto is just a really big wild card. And I personally want to lean, I think that if we're ranking best teams, that they're going to be in there over Indiana, over Washington. But because we're not just ranking best teams, and we have to look at all the stress that might go into it with COVID and how that could greatly impact their season, I am kind of inclined to leave them on the outside looking in. I don't want to. I hope I'm wrong. But I am more inclined to put them out there and put them at around the 11 or 12 spot.
Yeah, and the other team that I immediately jumped to for that 11-12 spot are the Wizards.
Yeah.
And the reason why they're tough is where they really only, everyone looks at them and they really only have Bradley Beal. But I think one sneaky move, because and everyone's been talking about Bradley Beal for trades and the Wizards just go and rebuild. The Wizards have been making moves to try to rebuild around Bradley Beal. And they just traded Westbrook, and they got a lot of good role players to fill the roster. So they don't have a ton of star talent, but they have a pretty deep roster. And that's something that if Bradley Beal goes off, and I think we both agree that he's a little bit overrated, but he definitely has that talent there that he could go off with a good roster around him. A couple guys step up. They might sneak into those play-in games and maybe even sneak into the upper ends of the play-in games. But I don't know. There's nothing to base that off of, and the Bulls are like another team that we don't have much to base off of either. But
well, when you look at the fact that you could make an argument that if Donovan Mitchell just shot 3 to 4 more shots a game, he could actually be averaging more points a game than Bradley Beal. And you look at the fact that part of the reason Bradley Beal puts up so many points is because he's carrying his team. It really just kind of like squashes the narrative. Like, yes, he's a very good player, but being a good player on a good team is a lot harder than being a good player on a bad team. Because if you're the only one with the ball, you're obviously going to score a lot of points. So I do really agree with you on putting them on the outside looking in. I'd probably stick them 12 and Toronto 11. And I think the next one that I'm putting Pacers 10. I know that they have Carlisle, a new coach. I think you mentioned that they have some injury issues. And really, they're kind of, I put on the inside looking out, but I could honestly see Indiana falling out of it completely and Toronto taking their spot.
Yeah, and with these bottom few teams, well, like it's really in tiers. We can see them go, like how injuries work. If one player gets hot, that could be enough to move the Raptors or the Wizards up to this 10 spot. And but I agree with you. I like the Pacers at 10. TJ Warren is hurt. It's a fractured foot, so they don't really have a timeline on it. I think the overall expectation is he'll miss a good chunk of the first part of the season, but he'll probably still play 80+% of the season overall. If he comes in healthy, has an awesome year, he's kind of an on and off player. Sometimes he's great, sometimes he's not. With Brogdon and Miles Turner, and like they have a decent squad when they're all healthy. So they're another one that could even jump higher. But like you said, injury problems, and like it's not like they're in like a lot better than the Raptors or a lot better than the Wizards or anyone else. So I'm happy with them at 10.
Yeah. And then we're looking at this, and I mean, obviously, we're not going to put the 76ers, Nets, Bucks, Hawks, or Heat in the play-in. I think is kind of what we decided. I'm inclined to not include the Celtics in there either. So that leaves us with who? That leaves us with, so we have 10-9. That leaves us with the Knicks, and who else? I lost.
With the Knicks, the Bulls, and the Hornets.
Knicks, yes, the Bulls.
If we're moving the Celtics up to top 6.
And we can definitely discuss the Celtics and where they're going to fall. I think the Bulls, sheer talent-wise, are going to have to be a top 8 team. I'm predicting the Knicks to fall off this year. I just feel like last year was a bit of a fluke, and they didn't really do a lot to get better. Hawks are going to have a much better season, I think, after everything we've seen. Heat kind of had a bunch of weird COVID stuff going through their organization. So I think I'm putting Hornets at number 9.
Really?
And like, yeah, and LaMelo Ball could I mean, he was injured a bit last season, right? And they had some injury issues there. But I feel like I'm kind of between Bulls and Hornets for that spot. And I think that the Bulls just have more talent. Yeah. And talent definitely doesn't win you championships all the time, but it does get you higher seeds typically.
That's fair. Their talent is also more experienced overall. When the Hornets, the best player, I think their best player right now is LaMelo Ball. Hornets
I mean, Gordon Hayward's
if you disagree with me, go for it.
Like nobody at me in the comments. I know we're a Jazz podcast, but Gordon Hayward's still playing really good. If he's able to have a healthy season, like he's going to be a solid piece next to LaMelo Ball.
And they have Terry Rozier. I liked their team. It's just when your franchise cornerstone's a rookie, it's really tough to go anywhere.
But
I thinking about it though, like the Knicks just had a great year last year. I agree they're probably going to fall off. I don't think they're going to fall off so much as down to 9. The Bulls, this is their first year together, but it's a much more experienced team. And Zach LaVine, I think, is probably the best, at least offensive player on the Bulls.
Yeah.
and he's better than LaMelo Ball. So I'm, talking it through. Let's put the Hornets at 9.
Okay.
But honestly, like 7 through 10, it's all the same. That's the same tier of just you're a play-in team in that range.
You might get home court and you might only have to win one game, but you're still a play-in team. You're right. So that leaves us to Bulls and Knicks. And I just think it's going to take the Bulls a while to get meshed. So I think I would put Bulls in at 8 and then Knicks at 7. Like, I think the Knicks overperformed a bit last year, but not enough for me to drop them all the way down to 8.
Yeah, it all comes down for this right here. It all comes down to Julius Randle. He did not show up in the playoffs at all. And whatever he did over this offseason is going to decide where the Knicks go. If he's the kind of player where when he gets beat down, he works twice as hard and pulls himself out, then the Knicks might be a home court advantage team in the playoffs again, like they were last year. But I don't know. I didn't see much of that from him in the playoffs. Obviously, there's been a whole offseason between then and now, and that's why I'm putting him in the play-in. But I like the Knicks a little bit higher, like you said, just because I don't know how Randall's going to come back after that playoff defeat.
We've seen performance from them while we haven't seen it from the Bulls. So I'm much more willing to go with what we've seen versus the unknown. But you're totally right. Like, that playoff series was atrocious. And we'll get to the Hawks here in a minute. But I think we're probably both in agreement. We don't think the Celtics are a play-in team, but we're pretty confident. I'm going to put them at 6. Like, you need Schroeder to show up this year. You've made some moves. Like, getting rid of Kemba Walker was a big positive, even though you had to give up a pick or two to pull that off. But the Celtics just need to prove to me that they're good, that they're actually, and they have the new coach, they have the new general manager, or wait, did Stevens go to general manager or did he go to president? I think he went to president.
Honestly, I'm not sure what in the media, they talk about those roles almost the same. Like when Daryl Morey went to the 76ers, all of a sudden they talk about him like he's the general manager, even though he's not.
Yeah, no, that's true. Not really a big difference, but I am more inclined to put the Celtics down at 6. I just feel like they consistently underperform, and they need to show me a lot more before I put them higher up.
Yeah, Jason Tatum needs an MVP season to be a top 4 team in the East.
Yeah.
Okay, so now we're left with our top 5 teams. Some of these I don't like, because the Celtics they have some really good talent, but they haven't shown that they can turn that into wins even in the regular season. We have some teams who, like, going into last season, I would have never thought them to be like top 5 teams. And like the Hawks, I didn't think much of them until that playoff run. And obviously I don't want to put too much weight on the playoff run because this is a regular season ranking that we're doing. And also the Heat, even though they were in the finals in the bubble, like looking at them the season after that, they just really weren't looking like that great of a team. But I don't know, like looking at
Jimmy
the
Butler
just
had
ranked,
those injury issues, and they had a lot of players who had to sit out due to close contact COVID stuff.
And they're coming back. Basically the same core. They haven't had a ton of changes. They've been together. They've been to a finals already. And Jimmy Butler wants to get that ring. So I think he's going to play out. And his numbers, he's one of those players that his box score doesn't really show everything. He won't be scoring 20 points plus a game, averaging the season most likely, but he'll be doing a lot of other stuff.
How do we feel like Kyle Lowry fits on the team? Since that's like the real unknown there, like you finally have a point guard, like a true point guard. He's definitely aging. You've got him on the wrong side of his career, but he's still a veteran and he's going to give you a lot of solid minutes. You've got Bam Adebayo, right?
It's Kyle Lowry. He's really interesting because he's not really a shooter. He's kind of like that same DeMar DeRozan kind of thing. Like if DeMar has an open 3, if Kyle Lowry have an open 3, like they're probably going to hit it down. They're not awful shooters, but
yeah,
you can't count on him to go be a sharpshooter. Jimmy Butler's the same way on the Heat. So Lowry brings a lot to the table. He's a great like energy guy. He's a smart point guard. I don't know. Like I think he fits in with the team, but this is a '90s basketball roster. I feel like.
It doesn't have
this
that
roster into the
3-and-D
'90s
kind of mentality.
Yeah, like I don't think they'd win a championship in the '90s because they don't like Bam is kind of he'd be a power forward in the '90s. But like copy paste and like they'd fit right in. So I don't know. I don't think it's a bad fit. I don't think it's like it's not like all of a sudden they're bumped up a tier because of Kyle Lowry there. So I don't think I think it's probably a net positive, but maybe like a 2 or 3 game net positive.
I'm just really kind of stuck here because I don't want to just completely disrespect what the Hawks did because they definitely showed that they're a good team. In the same light, though, are they kind of going to end up being like Portland was a few years back, make that run to the conference finals and then never really show up afterwards? Like, I mean, Portland hasn't shown, but they've never repeated that success. But I definitely feel like I expect Miami to pick up more extra wins than Atlanta. And I mean, that's 4 or 5, and I don't know who I'm comfortable dropping down into that spot. Like, even if the 76ers fall off, I don't think they're going to fall off all the way down to 5.
Yeah, especially since, I don't know, with the whole Ben Simmons thing, they're either like, they're holding out for a decent trade. And or like they're probably going to figure out a way to get him to play, even though he's not saying that. So I agree with you that I don't want to talk about the Sixers in the 4 or 5. I don't know, maybe the 4, but I don't know. That's kind of a fall for them. But the Hawks Heat, I don't know. I don't think the Hawks will have the same playoff success, but comparing them to the Trailblazers, I think this Hawks team is more talented than any Trailblazers team Damian Lillard has been a part of.
They're definitely a lot younger, right? So you're not going to, I mean, you're going to see them have more natural improvement, I feel like, than the Trailblazers did, just based on age. I do think, with no disrespect, I mean, the East is definitely 6-7 teams deep this year. Maybe not for a finals, but it's deeper than it's ever been for a while.
For conference finals, probably.
Yeah, so I think I'm going to leave Atlanta at 5. I don't think that I can move them up this year. And I mean, the Heat were 1 game back. And I feel like, well, the Hawks will have some natural improvement. I feel like the Heat, as long as they have a healthier season with less COVID issues, that they're going to get more games than the Hawks are going to get.
I think that's fair. And I do think that the Hawks are probably a more talented team, but I think throughout the course of the season, and especially now that they're going to like the NBA, Trae Young's one of those players like James Harden where he tries to get the free throw line, and the NBA is making that a little bit harder to do. He might have to adjust his game at the beginning.
Yeah.
And I like Trae Young. He's a better player than Jimmy Butler right now. Like if I were building a team, I would rather Trae Young. He doesn't have the same defense. He doesn't have all that stuff. But I would take Trae Young. You may disagree with me, but I think Jimmy Butler, right now, he may not put up the same amount of points or explode like that. But when it comes down to a close game, I don't know. He won't be hitting the 3, but all the little things don't show up on the stat sheet. He's like a much better Andre Iguodala. And that's maybe not fair to say because Andre Iguodala was really, really good before he started getting old.
Obviously, if you're building a team, you're taking Trae Young, right? I mean, you have 10, 12 more years out of Trae versus 2-3 years out of Jimmy Butler. But I'd probably take Jimmy Butler just because of experience. But I mean, next year, the year after that, like it's Trae Young's just going to be a lot closer. So, and here's where I'm kind of going to bank something and feel like maybe make a push. And I don't know what's going to happen, but I'm going to slot the 76ers in at 4. And hear me out on this, because there's the Ben Simmons fiasco. I don't think he's playing. Unless the NBA passes some new rules, which I think they kind of need to, right? Like, he has 3 years left on his deal, maybe 4 years left on his deal. You can't be able to force your way out of an organization and not play with that much left on your deal. Like, 1 year left, we can talk about it, but the NBA should not work in a way where he's able to keep that money. And I don't know if the way it should be set up is if by not playing a game and boycotting like this, he forfeits half of his salary for the season up front, no matter what. I'm not sure how to go with it, but that mixed with the fact that I don't know what they're going to get in return for him when they trade him. And Joel Embiid had one of his healthier years last year. And I just think after a short off season, I don't think we're going to see him having another healthy enough year to really compete. So I'm going to put him at 4. And I think, while definitely the Nets' health impacts this, the Heat at 3.
Interesting. I'm not going to argue that too hard, because like I said, in like tier, I think I may be a little bit more optimistic on the 76ers future, but then again, I've also been optimistic on Ben Simmons turning into more than what he has so far. So maybe my opinions on the 76ers don't count as much. But I don't know. I'm interested to see it. I don't think the Heat will be top 3. But
Okay.
like they're right there though.
Yeah.
Like I do think they'll be 4 or 5. And so if things with the 76ers go worse, and if everything else how we laid it out goes kind of how we expect it, I feel like the Heat maybe aren't a top 3 seed, but the other teams will fall enough for them to slide in there. So let's put Heat at 3 and 76ers at 4, which means the 76ers have to face the Hawks again in the first round.
That would be a better storyline, in my opinion, than New York, Atlanta. Maybe like people in the city really felt that storyline, but as someone, out here on the West Coast, that storyline meant nothing to me. I just thought it was I did not enjoy that series that much. So then here's the thing, though. These are kind of two teams. Like, I don't want to pick either of these teams to get the 1 seed. Looking at the Bucks and the Nets. Like, I'm putting the Nets at 2, not because I think the Bucks will get 1, but just because health and resting wise, I don't think the Bucks are going to fight for the number 1 seed.
Yeah, well, I agree. Bucks are probably going to get 1. They did have a long playoff run, won the championship.
Yeah,
but they last season, the reason they weren't the highest seed is because they were trying to figure stuff out. They realized that what they were doing wasn't working. Obviously, with the championship,
the Jazz
things kind of started clicking.
Yeah.
So I think the Bucks will come in, things will click. I think they'll have a great regular season. Chances of them repeating are low, unless everyone on the Nets gets injured or Kevin Durant keeps stepping on the 3-point line.
Kevin Durant just takes all 2s. His shoe is magnetized to the 3-point line. Can't get a 3-pointer up. Yeah, and you are right to mention, they obviously had the longest season because along with the Suns. And then you had Chris Middleton, Drew Holiday, and Giannis all play in the Olympics. So that's definitely, Giannis is probably young enough it doesn't matter, but you still need, I would not be shocked. Let me put it this way. I would not be shocked to see the Heat or the Hawks come out and get the 1 seed. Hawks more so, but just based on resting and injuries and things but the Heat are older, so I'm not sure. I'm super waffling on these. I feel much more confident with my West rankings, or our West rankings, but I do think I'm kind of set on the Bucks at 1 and the Nets at 2.
Yeah, well,
Like,
well,
like,
and looking at things like, uh, I agree. Like Bucks and Nets are the elite teams. I don't know what's going on with the 76ers. Like, throw them out. Hawks, they just went on a crazy run. They have a lot of talent. Heat, they were in the finals not too long ago. The Bulls
yeah,
just got a bunch of great talent. I think the Knicks got better, and we were both predicting that they'll probably fall off. But I think they made some good moves in the free agency, and so it's like we could totally see if stuff goes really wrong in Philadelphia. Joel Embiid gets hurt again, which is totally plausible. We could see the Bulls being the 5 seed and the Knicks being the 3 seed, and
yeah,
the Hawks being the 1 seed, and the Bucks fall down to
to
4
5 or
or
6.
yeah.
You
So it's like
know, I mean,
I don't know what's going to happen. That like I think there's some really talented teams that could really surprise people that we ranked in the play-in games. But I agree with you. I'm not like the Nets are right up there. The Bucks are right up there, and I'm not anticipating any long injuries this year. And that might be wrong because the Nets were just suffering injuries all year long. But I think they're going to come in and have it figured out enough to get a top 2 seed. Maybe they'll fall to the 3 seed if things don't go quite as they expect at the end of the season. And they're probably going to win the championship.
I feel that way, and that's kind of why I said at the beginning, like, if the Nets are healthy, no one can stop them. I mean, you have 3 of the best ISO scorers in the league, and especially if it ends up being Jazz Nets, it's going to be hard for Utah because we've seen that if you pull Rudy out to the corner, the Jazz don't have good enough on-ball defenders to stop people from getting to the paint. So if with an open paint, and without Rudy Gobert back there as the last line of defense, it's hard. So,
and we saw how the Jazz handled a James Harden led team, just James Harden.
Yeah,
and like Kyrie Irving can play that same style of basketball. Kevin Durant can play that same style of basketball. So how are the Jazz going to, when they were throwing their whole defense at one guy and couldn't stop him? What are they going to do with 3 guys?
No, that's fair. And I mean, the Jazz were a couple shots away from sending that thing to 7 games. Obviously, they lost it in 5, but I mean, the Jazz could have been up 3-2 going into Game 6. So that didn't happen, and they've improved so much over those last 3 years that I'm not.
It's not really a fair comparison.
I don't think it's a fair comparison there. But obviously, it's not just a James Harden-led team. It's Kevin Durant, who's better than James Harden, and then Kyrie Irving, who's slightly not as good as James Harden. And that they've had what's happened with LeBron, you know, where you have a bunch of veterans going and taking the minimum to play there, which you haven't had happen with Utah. So it's going to be a crazy year. I'm definitely more confident in saying in the West that it's going to be the Suns, Jazz, or Lakers who get the 1 seed. And while I probably end up picking 76ers, Nets, and Bucks, like I feel like there's a much higher chance of another team sneaking in the East than in the West.
Yeah, I'm excited for it. I agree with you. We don't follow the East as much, so it's a little bit more up in the air. But let us know if you agree. Like, what did we completely mess up on?
Please do.
We'll leave our full rankings down in the description and in the pinned comment, so you can just refer back to them there. I'll throw Detroit, Orlando, and Cleveland, just whatever order I feel like, because we didn't really talk about the order there. They'll just be the worst 3 teams in the East. And let us know what you think about the fantasy basketball league. If you want to participate, what are your favorite places to have a fantasy basketball? We're thinking about Sleeper and ESPN. Let us know your thoughts in the comments, and we'll get some solid announcements on that probably next week.